Yes, good evening to everybody and the International Human Rights Law students.
Good evening.
Here I admitted, and Christian Masanja is present, Sakina Paul is present over there. Now you read what I posted on the screen. Quick, quick. Unmute and read what I posted on the screen.
Okay. How UN promote and protect human rights.
Go ahead.
The UN Security Council at times deal with grave human rights violation, often in conflict areas. The UN Charter gives the Security Council the authority to investigate and mediate, dispatch a mission, appoint special envoys, all request the Secretary-General to use his good office. The term human right was mentioned 7 times in the UN's Foundation Charter, making the promotion and protection of human rights a key purpose and guiding principles of the organization.
When you are reading that you said UN's, you did not say founding. Okay, anyway, that I would like to explain it. The UN Security Council. So the UN, the role is promote and protect the human rights. That's the key role of the UN. The UN Security Council is one of the good, the organ, the special organ or the powerful organ. At times deal with the grave human rights violations, and it deals often in conflict areas. Where there is a conflict area should be there in the states, then Security Council will deal such a things. The UN Charter gives the Security Council. What is the UN Charter? The first charter of 1948, that is United Nations Charter for the Human Rights. So that gives the Security Council the authority to investigate and mediate. So when the matter comes over there for the grave violation would be there, they will investigate in the states and they will mediate between the states or the state where such a violence is going on. And if they want the dispatch mission, the peacekeeping force, the dispatch mission means they can send even the peacekeeping forces and appoint a special envoys, and there are special envoys also appointed or request the Secretary General, and at the last they request the Secretary General to use his good offices. So what is the Secretary General will do it? He will make the economic sanctions, yes. He will curtail the diplomatic relationship, and there is no ban on visiting. All these things will be done by the Secretary General to use his good offices, use such a sanctions. So here that I already told you that the human rights was mentioned 7 times in the United the founding charter, that is the 1948 charter, making the promotion and production of the human rights and a key purpose and a guiding principle of the organization. So that organization guiding principle is to protect and to promote and protect the human rights. This is the gist of the UN dealing with the human rights. Now let us left over there, we will come to the point of the legal framework that we left over there in the last class. So when you say the legal framework, there is a UN charter is there. There is the first charter of 1948. And next International Human Rights Law is there. And that law is about the human rights protections of all the people, those who are in different states or the state which is having the sovereignty, and the Security Council resolutions, how the Security Council will play an important role to promote and production of the human rights. So let us see the legal framework of the promotion and production of the human rights in United Nations Peacekeeping Organization, that is the UNPCOS. That is the offices include, that is UN Peacekeeping Organizations, which includes, they said, UN Charter is there in it, and International Human Rights Law is there, and it also having the International Humanitarian Law. I don't know whether you know what is the International Humanitarian Law. Of course, we will going to deal it now. don't worry it. When there is a two states, the conflict of the war would be there at the time, the international humanitarian law come into the existence. Then Security Council resolutions are there. What are the resolutions would be passed by the Security Council to promote and protect the human rights if any violations would be there in a state by its subjects. So now let us see the Security Council has increasingly mandated peace operations and special political missions, that is SPMs, to protect and promote the human rights or before or during after the conflict, and to protect the civilians in armed conflict. When you say armed conflict, at the time humanitarian law will come into the picture, and the imminent threat of the physical violence would be there. So, for example, Security Council resolution in 1894-2009 on protection of the civilian in armed conflict states stresses the deliberations targeting the civilians and the commission of the systematic flagrants, widespread violation of the applicable international humanitarian law. So what I want to say here is there is the resolution would be there. Whenever there is a conflict would be there of armed conflict. At the times, the humanitarian law will come into the picture. If the armed conflict not there, only the violation there of the human rights and abuse is there at the time, then the Security Council will play a role and the international human rights law will come to the rescue. So these are the points which will be covered over there. Then we will say what is IHRL. That is International Human Rights Law. Can you read? What is IHRL? Anyone can unmute and read. Participants.
International human rights law is a set of international rules established by treaty or
custom. Okay, I will make it out because there is a problem of your internet. So IHRL means International Human Rights Law is a set of international rules, and it is established by a treaty or customs on the basis of which individuals and groups can expect and virtue or claim certain behavior or benefits from the government. So they will get the benefits from the government because they do have the certain rights. So human rights are inherent entitlement which belong to every person irrespective of the creed and caste and color as a consequence of being a human. So if you are being a human, then naturally the human rights which will be there inherent, it will be bestowed on you. So that is the human rights law. Then what is the international humanitarian law? When you say the international humanitarian law is a set of rules that seeks for humanitarian reason to limit the effect of the armed conflict. When there is a armed conflict will be there, at that instance, the international humanitarian law will come into the existence. Is it clear?
Yes.
So when the international humanitarian law will come into the existence? Yes? When there is a armed conflict, say?
Yes.
Say? When there is a armed conflict would be there in the states, at that instance, the international humanitarian law come into the existence because it protects the person who are not or are no longer directly or actively participating in the hostilities and imposes a limits on the means or method of the welfare. Actually, they did not participate in the hostilities with their states, and at that instance, the humanitarian law will come to the rescue of the innocents. And IHL, that the international humanitarian law, is also known as the law of the war. In other words, we can say it's the law of the war, that is the armed conflict, or the law of the armed conflict, both the way we can say it. So international humanitarian law is a part of the public international law, which is made as a primarily treaties, customary international laws, and general principle of laws, So that would be the international, that is the humanitarian law. Why it is said the public international law? Yes, international humanitarian law is said a public international law. Why it is said? Why it is not a private international law? Yes. If you know it, you tell me. If you don't know it, you say pass on. I will give you the answer. Yes. I repeat. If you know it, you tell me. If you don't know it, you say pass on. And I will give you the answer. Don't waste the time. The question is, international humanitarian law is said to be a public international law, they said. Why not it is a private international law, my question.
Professor, I'm saying
Please.
that it is part of public law because it deals with states and not individuals.
No. The right answer is,
Do you get my point?
the right answer is, it is a conflict of laws, that to be the war, armed conflict. It is a criminal one. When it is a criminal one, we don't consider as a private international law. Are you following me?
Yes.
Hence, we can say it is a public international law. So, which is made up a primarily treaties, customary international law, and general principle of law. Of course, they say Article 30 of the State of the International Court of Justice. It is made very much clear under the humanitarian law. A distinction must be made between international humanitarian law, which regulates the conduct of the parties engaged in an armed conflict, that is a public international law, are set out in the Charter of the United Nations, which regulate whether a state may lawfully resort to the armed forces against another state, just ad bellum, that is another state. The Charter prohibits such a use of force with two exceptions: cases of the self-defense and the armed attacks. And when the use of the armed forces is authorized by the United Nations Security Council, IHL, International Humanitarian Law, does not stipulate whether the commencement of the armed conflict was a legitimate or not, but rather seeks to regulate the behavior of parties once it has started. So what I want to say is, here is, it is very much international human rights law will come into the picture at that instance when there is a armed conflict, there is a war of law, and it is said to be the public international law because it deals with the crime and deals with the public. It is not a private international law. Because when you come to the matter of the private international law, there should be a cross boundary, and that to be the civil case. Example, please tell me. If you don't know, you say pass on. The question is, the private international law, we will say civil law. Example, again I told you, if you don't know, you say pass on. Don't waste the time. Argue the answer. Participants, the reason is the private international law is a civil law because it deals with the law of tort, it deals with the breach of contract, it deals with the matrimonial matters, and deals with the property law. Is it clear? Say yes at least. Is it clear? There is a problem, that's why you could not hear me. Yes, participants, at least are you hearing me now? Participants, are you hearing me now? Participants, are you hearing me now? See, from my side, there is no problem at all. everything is perfect. Okay, let me go further because already we dealt with the Security Council and its resolutions and how it can be done and what are the things will be done by the POC and in the armed conflicts. And it says the armed affirms the priority of the mandated production activities of the Security Council will deal and emphasizes the importance of the comprehensive production strategies, which include the accountability for the human beings violation and abuses. And these are the things the Security Council will deal it. Participants, are you hearing me? Participants, are you hearing me?
Yes, Prof.
Why you are not giving the answer to my question when I say the are you hearing me? Yes, now let us see the fourth point, UN partners leading to the human rights. So this is the very important one of the agency which take care of the human rights. That is OHCHR, that is the High Commissioner for the Human Rights. That is the High Commissioner for the Human Rights. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Human Rights. Office of the High Commissioners for the Human Rights, that is called OHCHR. And it is the initialism has led responsibility to, in the UN system, promote and protection of the rights. Its mandate comes from the UN General Assembly. So UNHCR is one of the organ which will protect, promote and protect the human rights, and it is a mandate came from the UN General Assembly. The General Assembly made such a, that is a UN High Commissioner for the Human Rights. Now let us see the UN Commissioner for the Human Rights leads a global human rights efforts working in close collaborations with the government and the UN agents, entities, and other intergovernmental organizations, including the NGOs, as well as the civil society. And the OHCHR has offices and centers in many countries and regions. So in the box that I made, OHCHR is the East African Regional Office is there. OHCR, Office of the Human Rights Commission, and its regional offices is there, that is supports the African Union and strengthening in its institutional capacity to deliver on the human rights dimensions of its work. So in the African region, and it is there to protect, promote the human rights. The regional offices also monitor human rights developments, and the regional offices at, yes, read, the regional offices at, the regional offices also monitor the human rights developments in, where are the places, the regional offices? Participants.
Djibouti, yes. It is in Djibouti, Ethiopia.
Read. Read.
Ethiopia, Professor.
I said read the full sentence. Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, and supports the government and civil society, the UN country teams, and other stakeholders to strengthen the human rights protection system and mainstream human rights in program. So OHCHR regional offices are there at Djibouti, in Ethiopia, and Tanzania. In support countries, the sub-region also regional offices provides advice in the human rights and gender equality and the human rights treaty body commitment. So regional offices plays an important role in the promotion and the protection of the human rights. So other countries in the sub-region are covered by the OHCHR. The components within the peace mission is, there is a Somalia is there, South Sudan is there, and Sudan is there. So by the OHCR, the Office of the Human Rights Commission country, offices there in Sudan, in Uganda, by Human Rights Advisor offices in the UN resident, coordinator is there in the Kenya. Because most of the UN offices, where it is located? Which country it is located? I repeat the question. Most of the UN offices, organizations or agency in which country in East African community? If you know it, you tell me. If you don't know it, you say pass on. I will give the answer. Participants. In which country it is there in the East African community where the UN offices are more there and its agencies? Sir, Tanzania. Sir, Uganda. Sir, Burundi. Answer no. It is in Kenya. It is in Kenya. So the head of the OCHR is High Commissioner for the Human Rights. The High Commissioner regularly comprehends the human rights in the world, and she has an authority to investigate the cases and issue reports. So the Office of the Human Rights Commission also is the promote and the protect the human rights. So different parts of the UN monitor how does comply with the international human rights treaties. So OSCHR also plays an important role in the human rights activities. That's what I want to impress upon you. So the council, there is also a UN human rights mechanism is a human rights council. We already said there is a human rights council also there, and this council periodically reviews the human rights record of all the countries through the United Periodic Review. So in addition to OSCHR, there is a human rights council also established over there, and it is also review the reports of the different countries where the human rights violations are there. It also discusses to take the action on the human rights concern in any part of the world. So the council is an intergovernmental body, and this council is made with the UN members. At least 47 members are elected by the UN General Assembly to form this council, and it meets in office, and the office is in Geneva. Where is in Geneva? Participants.
Switzerland.
Repeat.
Switzerland.
I appreciate. So now let us see the UN policies on human rights. What are the UN policies on human rights are there? So number one, human rights upfront, that is HRUF initiatives. It is made in the 2013, and a UN policy on human rights in UN peace operations and a political mission. These are the policies of the human rights. And the UN policy on the human rights screening of UN personnel is made in the 2012, and human rights due diligence policies on support and non-UN security forces. So when you have to give the answer, suppose the question is asked, how the UN will play an important role to promote and protect the human rights. At that instance, take one example, one things and explain it. That depends upon the question, you write it. If the question answer is 15 to 20 marks, you write elaborately all the points. And if not, you can just give the bullets and see that there are policies are there. Number one, the policy of the HRUF, that is the initiative. Number two, human rights, UN peace operations and political mission. Number three, UN policy on human rights screening of UN personnel. Number four, human due diligence policy and UN support to non-UN security forces. So these are the policies also there to see that it will be protected. So now let us see the human rights upfront policy. So the UN Secretary General introduced the human rights upfront. It's a policy in the 2012. Its goals in UN to prevent and respond to a large scale of violations in IHRL and IHL. That is the International Human Rights Law and the International Humanitarian Law with the early and effective reasons. So this HRUF see that whatever the conflict would be there, either the armed conflict or the human rights violations are there, and they will check the both of them. If it is a conflict of the war is there, then we can say the International Humanitarian Law. If the only violation abuse is there, we can say International Human Rights Law. It will come into the picture. So that is the role of the policy of that one, first one. Then UN policy on human rights in United Nations peace operations and political missions. So peace operations, when there is a violation should be there in the state, the peace operation department will work over there, and even the General Assembly, even the Security Council will send the peacekeeping forces over there to see there will be peace prevail over there and there will not be any human rights violations. So the peace operations will work in such a manner. So this much you can write it. That is more than enough for that point. So now let us see that there are specific roles of various missions and components of human rights UN policy. That is a human rights screening, the UN policy of the human rights screening on UN personnels. So what is the screening policy? Let us see it. So when you come to the matter of the screening policy, it is made in the 2012, and a policy ensures only individuals with the highest integrity serve with the UN. So that is the number one. And a member state nominating is sending a person to the UN or to screen them and certify the non-have committed the crimes and violated in the year. So whenever the member states are sending the people for the personnel for the screening them, it is the UN will see that whether they have whether they have a certified or non-have committed a crimes, whether they have committed a crimes or violated it or not, they will select it. If they did not commit such a thing should be there and the criminal record is not there, and first such members will be taken as a screening committee members. So individuals who seek to serve in the UN are asked to confirm they have not committed a crimes or violated the international law. So the person thus who are sent as a members, it is made it very much clear that they are not involved in any crimes and also not violated the international law. The UN Secretary manages and informs the exchange the screening candidate and nominate the human rights candidate. So the screening committee will be there nominated by the UN Secretary by taking into consideration and his member will be not involved in any crimes as well as not violated any international. Such people will be taken to the screening committee, and this committee will work to see that whether there is a human rights violations are there or not. Then the last point is human rights due diligence policy. Then what is this due diligence policy? It means acting with a certain standard of care. So whenever such a person's made over there as a member, they have to take the due diligence, means act with their due care. The 213 policy states that all UN entities must ensure any support, any prompt of the non-UN forces. So now let us see what is the follow of the UN charters. So meets the UN responsibility in respect of the promote and encourage the respect of the IHRL and IHL in the international refugee law. So the responsibility of the UN charter is to see that whether there is a human rights violations are there, whether there is a human rights abuse are there, whether there is a conflict of the war conflicts are there, the law of war is there, and how it can be made. If the law of war is there, there is a violation of the, yes, when the law of the war is there, what is the violations over there? What is the comes into the existence when there is a war conflicts are there? Participants. The existence of international humanitarian law comes into the picture when there is a law of war is there. If only merely violations are there, abuse is there, at that instance, international human rights law will come into the picture. Of course, there is the migrants are there and people are coming for the asylum, then we can say the international refugee law, but just we want to make it out. Now let us see that the last point is, not last, but one point is, it is human rights and UN peacekeeping. I already told you that UN peacekeeping force is there to take care of all the human rights violations. So integrated into everyday work, the UN and the support of the national capacity. These are the two aspects of it. It will work. Peacekeeping forces, protecting. So protecting and promotion of the human right is everyone's responsibility. It is not only the UN or UN agency or OCHR or the Security Council or the council members. So protecting and promoting the human right is everyone's responsibility, and this requires, yes, read what is this requires. This requires, this read.
Okay. Integrating human rights into everyday work.
Good.
Supporting lasting human right capacity,
Very good.
recognize human right violation and abuses,
Good.
respond correctly at minimum report,
Good.
the conduct of peacekeeping personnel must follow human rights standards.
These are the things which everyone must to observe it. That is, when you are reading, respond correctly, not correctly. Correctly. Respond correctly. That is the fourth one. Respond correctly. I mean this one. Respond correctly at the minimum report. The conduct of the peacekeeping personnel must follow the human rights standards. So these are the activities. Not only the human right peacekeeping force, but everyone should have to follow the things. Then the last point we would like to make it is role and responsibility. What is the role and responsibilities? So number one, the monitor and investigate the human rights violations and abuses. That is the role of all the organ of the UN, including the agency, including the OCHR, including the Security Council, or including the council members. So produce the internal and public reports and advocacy and intervention, strengthen the national local capacity, coordination and mainstreaming in the humanitarian country team. So these are the responsibility. You will see it, how the responsibility come into the picture. The human rights component of the mission advises and coordinates on human rights. Okay, the human rights component is a part of the mission. It's a civilian component. So let us see what the UNHCR, that is the Office of the Human Rights Commission, has integrated human rights components in the UN peace operations and political missions. This is instead of establishing the separate OCHR field offices in countries where the security deploys such operations. So it is the OCHR will take the into responsibility for the promotion and protection of the human rights, and human rights other missions also will work for the promotion and protection of the human rights. That is the responsibility. The head of the human rights component, that is the high commissioners of the human rights, that is the head of the OHCHR in the mission area, either in the regional level or national level or international level, will take care of it. The core tasks of the human rights components are, number one, monitor and investigate the human rights violations and abuses. The responsibility of the UN and other organs which will try to protect and promote the human rights. So that is number one. So number two, yes, that is number one. Number two, produce the internal and public reports on human rights issues and activities. They have to make the reports. And in it, internal reports also will be made and distributed use of only the humanitarian rights components and peacekeeping operations, and OHCHR also will take part in it for the promotion and protection of the human rights. Then public reports shared with the public, it should be made, and host society, international partners and the media, it is the responsibility for them also. In addition to that, advocates and intervene the human rights issues. They are the individuals should have to take part, including the advocates, and from quiet diplomacy to the public endowment. Then strengthen the capacity of the host governments, and when the host government is there, and civil society, national human rights institutions, and the Human Rights Commission to protect the human rights over there. So these are the responsibilities are given for the UN and other agency and OCHR and the Security Council, including the council members. So coordinate the human rights work and help integrate it into the core of the identity, and including the UN peacekeeping operations and the UN country team and humanitarian country team also there. Of course, humanitarian country team will work when there is a law of war, that is armed conflicts are there. So now human rights officer carry out the missions on human rights mandate. Even in Tanzania also, there is a human rights commission is there, and there is of course, the members also there, and they will also work to to see if there are any human rights violations would be there in the local level, and they will make a report and see that the perpetrators will be punished. So they work with the others to mainstream of the human rights. So human rights teams on the ground work closely with other civilians and uniformed components and priorities, they do it. So what are the other components is protection of the civilians, conflict-related sexual violence, violence against the children and children protections, legal and judicial reforms, and security sector reforms, and prison system reforms. So these are the activities will be taken by the human rights team. What are the activities? Can you read? Because at any time it will be stopped now. Participants, what are the human rights team activities? Here which I am highlighting, read. Anyone can unmute and read. Participants.
Okay. Protection of civilians. POC. Conflict related to sexual violence. CRSV. Violation against children or child protection. Legal and judicial reform. Security sector reform. SSR. Prison system reform.
So these are all the activities done by the human rights team to see that there should be a civilian will not be affected, and a uniform component is there, and they have to work on the partnership to see that there will not be violation against the children, including the child protection, and the legal and judicial reforms, they have to take care of it, and the security sector reforms also they will make it out, including the prison system reforms. So these are the activities of the UN for the promotion and protection of the human rights. So we have such a components, and see, we have shown you that number 1, number 2, just the highlighted one you can note down. It is the number 1 definition of violation and abuses. What is violation and what is abuse? And among them, which is genus and which is species? Yes. Please go ahead. Even though it is wrong, doesn't matter. I will correct it. Human rights abuse is the genus and human rights violation is the species. So just you elaborate these 2 points, that is enough for that one. And next, second is importance on the human rights protection. This you can say a core pillar of the UN, number 1, and the development, we can say that who are the actors here to play an important role. So there is a peacekeeping, peace making, peace enforcement, peace building. These are the 4 components you should not forget in that one. So that is the second point. Then violation, then legal framework. You can use the UN Charter, then International Human Rights Law, and Security Council resolutions, and it's how it can make it out. That is third framework. Then the 4th framework is these are the bullets, you have to remember it so that you could elaborate it in a different manner, in a better manner. So the UN partners leading the human rights, just you write the OHCHR, the Office of the Human Rights Commission. If the regional offices are there and the national offices are there, you can write. It is also one of the organ, and it is mandate is given by the UN General Assembly, and you can write for the regional organs where are there. Djibouti is there, Ethiopia is there, Tanzania is there, Sudan is there, Uganda is there, and its main offices of the coordinators are in Kenya. So these are the things you can just write it. Then what is the policies? I told you the 4 policies. There is a upfront policy, and there is a peacekeeping operation policy, and there is a screening policy, there is a due diligence policy, and who are the members who can take it, and we already discussed it in detail, and thus we can just elaborate it. I'm sure that much is more than enough if you are giving. Then the human rights, UN peacekeeping, that because that is the core of it is UN peacekeeping, it will deal the human rights, protect the human rights should be there, even if it is peacekeeping with the Security Council, which make the sanctions also, and some of the points it is highlighted over there, just you write those points. Then another is the roles and responsibilities are concerned. Yes, you can write the UN responsibility roles and agency roles and OHCHR roles and what they have to do it. Not only this agency, even the individuals. So they also made it, even the individuals also can make such a thing. That is the human rights violations should be there, even if they should have to make it out. So that is also a point they made it very much clear. And the last point which I want to make it is human rights team, what they have to do is the team on the grounds of the work closely and other civilian uniformed components, the priority must be given. Number one, protection of the civilians are there. They should not be affected. And the conflict related to the sexual violence, then sexual violence should be stopped over there among the women and the children, and a violation against the children. And again, that is a point, harassment, torture, abuse, and children protection should be given the priority. Legal and judicial reforms should have to make it out to see that if anybody suffered over there without any due process of law, and if he's detained, and then we can file a case in the human rights violations under the Constitution article as well as the human rights that UN DHR, that is a product, that is a 1948 charter also, we can use the articles over there. Then security reforms, how the the security sector reforms will be there. It will also be highlighted. Then will come the prison reforms, how a prisons will work, what are the policies of the prison, and how the prisoners will be treated over there. Because prisoners also are human beings, they should not be animals. So if they treat like animals, it is a human right violation. So these are the gist which I want to make it out. So make the bullet points and elaborate each one in your own words. That much is enough. I'm sure that it gives a sense to the examiner that yes, you have an idea how the UN agencies and how the UN and how the other that like the human rights commissions and Security Council and council members and the human rights team will work and see that how it can be protected, the human rights violations. Where there is a conflict of the war is there, there is a point that the law of the war and armed forces are there, armed conflicts are there. At that instance, it is not the international human rights law will come into the picture. Then what it come into the picture? When there is a conflict of war is there, when the armed conflict is there,
International Humanitarian Law.
I appreciate that will come into the picture over there. But the people will migrate because of the pressure, because of the torture, because of the rebellions, because of the government. Many other factors are come. At that time, the refugee law come into the picture because they will come as the refugees and they migrate to the. When there is a Congo war is there, many people will migrate to Tanzania also, including Uganda. Of course, Tanzania also received the many of the people what I heard it. So now, because of refugee, they will give the camp, the shelter to them. So now, at any time, it will be stopped over there. So if you happen to see our syllabus, then yes, we have covered the United Nations Human Rights Promotion System. And the next class, we will see that how effectiveness of the United Nations in the human rights system. That we will see it, because in each and every aspect the UN is attached. Why the UN is attached? The human rights pillar is UN, United Nations. It will protect the human rights. So the pillar of the human rights rests on the United Nations, and the other agencies also, they play an important role Plus, regional human rights commissions also play an important role. So even human rights team also plays an important role. So we have to go in that way. So let us see the next class, the effectiveness of the United Nations human rights system. So next class is, when is the next class?
Friday,
What timings?
around 5:10 to 6 p.m.
I appreciate. Now, at any time it will stop. If you want to ask any question, you can ask me. Otherwise, it will stop automatically because now it is going to be 10. Any questions? If the time is there, now we will repeat. I don't know when your exams are there. We will make the revision also. And we will review it also. At the time, we will learn more because this is the first review. No, we learned a little, but when you read again, and we will become a more perfect, and we know the very bullet points, and we can easily elaborate it. Even the question is asked in any manner. And I don't know whether you have seen the old question papers or not. If you've seen the old question papers, please try to share with me. Even I also prepare the answer, what should be the right answer for that question, and I will give the guidelines to you. These are the components should be present if the question is asked in this manner. So that will be a very good guidance to you to go through, and the phobia of your examination will be disappeared because you can write the, even though the question asked in a different style, by understanding it you can mold it and see that your answer will suit to that question. So if you happen to see the question papers, please share with me. Okay?
Okay.
So now I can stop it, or automatically it is going to be stopped. So now I'll stop it. Yeah, it is, time is up. Still, okay, I'll stop it. End of the meeting for all.
Wabariki